Coming up on Philosophy Talk.
My name is Lester Burnham.
You've worked hard, you've found success, and now you're asking yourself, is that all there is?
The midlife crisis. If you haven't had it yet, just wait.
I have lost something. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I know I didn't always feel this sedated. But you know what? It's never too late to get it back.
Is the midlife crisis nostalgia for lost youth or the fear of old age?
Why does midlife have to be a crisis?
Do you know anyone who didn't have a midlife crisis?
What should we do when the midlife crisis hits?
Our guest is Kieran Setiya, author of Midlife, a Philosophical Guide.
Midlife and Meaning.
Don't interrupt me, honey.
Coming up on Philosophy Talk.
Hey Josh, you're my favorite Francophile, so you'll appreciate this line from Camus. Real generosity toward the future lies in giving all to the present.
That's a great line and really timely. Our future sure could use some help right around now.
So what can people do to help us secure our future in the present?
Well, how about giving a tax-deductible donation to Philosophy Talk during our end-of-year fundraiser?
Yeah, just go to our website, philosophytalk.org, click on the donate button, and help us keep this program on the air and online now and into the future.
And now, on with the show.
Is midlife just the beginning of the end?
Or can it be the start of a whole new chapter?
Can philosophy help us navigate the shoals of midlife?
Welcome to Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything.
Except your intelligence. I'm Ken Taylor.
And I'm Josh Landy. We are here at the studios of KLW San Francisco.
Continuing conversations that begin at Philosopher's Corner on the Stanford campus, where I teach philosophy and Josh directs the Philosophy and Literature Initiative.
Today we're thinking about midlife and meaning.
Well, Josh, I don't really have any personal experience with this one. I've never had a midlife crisis. How about you?
Well, I think I've never not had a midlife crisis.
Really?
Yeah, I pretty much started around 30 and never looked back.
I mean, gosh, what was that like? Or should I say, what is that like?
Well, it's pretty straightforward. Just the feeling that what I'm doing isn't at all worthwhile.
Well, Josh, that's because you're in the literature department, dude.
Oh, that's rich coming from a philosopher.
Okay, fair enough. All kidding aside. You sound like that guy in the Sartre novel Nausea. You've lost all confidence in your fundamental project. Is that it?
Yeah, that's about right. Look, I just don't have a deep belief in its importance, for the world.
Well, but I'm not quite sure what that has to do with midlife in particular. That's just your ordinary existential crisis that could happen at any time in your life, young, old, or middle-aged.
I think there's something special about midlife, actually. Look, time is running out. People you love die, and all this stuff you've worked so hard to achieve, it isn't making you happy.
Well, if it's not making you happy, Josh, do something else.
Oh, okay. So you want me to choose some other career that also wouldn't make me happy. My point isn't that the career I happen to be in is pointless. It's that all careers are pointless.
Gosh, Josh, you're such a downer, man. You got it bad. I didn't realize that.
When you're younger, Ken, look, you're totally focused on the goals, right? The stuff that's ahead of you. Those goals, if you achieve them, they're going to make you happy and they're going to solve the world's problems. Then what happens? You land that promotion, you write that book, you create that app, and guess what? You're not happier. You're just older.
Oh, Josh, I think you need to look at life differently. Think of life as, like a series of experiments. Some work out, some don't. When one fails, well, you move on to the next hypothesis. And you don't think of it as a crisis. Think of it as your life speaking to you, giving you feedback.
Well, I'll grant you that life is an experiment, but what if the result of that experiment is that nothing matters? Oh. One day you'll be gone. Everyone you know will be gone. The whole human race will be gone. What's the point of any project?
Josh, you need some therapy, my friend. Look, here's what I think is wrong with you. You're just way too focused on goals and achievement. I know you. You're this hypercharged, overachieving guy. I think you need to stop and smell the roses, Josh. You need to learn to enjoy the process.
The living in the moment stuff.
Well, yeah. I'm with the poet Kavafi on this. He has this great poem about Odysseus. Odysseus spends 10 years at sea, and Kavafi says he was lucky it took him so long because, Josh, it's the journey that counts. The journey.
Yeah, Look, Ken, Odysseus wasn't just traveling. He was trying to get home. You need to reread that poem, Ken.
Okay.
Remember those great lines? Ithaca gave you the marvelous journey. Without her, you wouldn't have set out. Without Ithaca, there's no journey. Without a destination, all you're doing is just ambling about. You can't have a process if you don't have a goal.
No, I don't think I buy that. I mean, think of Camus' Sisyphus rolling that stone up the hill. It's always falling back, rolling it up. It's always, you know what Camus says? We have to imagine Sisyphus happy, even though there is no ultimate terminus. That's what living in the moment is all about, Josh. Forget the ultimate terminus.
Ken, that sounds like a terrible life.
Josh, look, I see I'm not going to convince you with philosophy or even with your own field, literature. Maybe a little science will help you. We sent our roving philosophical reporter, Liza Veal, to find out if there's any scientific basis for the way we imagine and navigate midlife. She files this report.
In Hollywood, midlife crises come out of nowhere. They get hit at a family dinner, like in the movie American Beauty.
Sorry I'm late.
No, that's quite all right, dear. Your father and I were just discussing his day at work. Why don't you tell our daughter about it, honey?
Janie, today I quit my job. And then I told my boss to go himself, and then I blackmailed him for almost $60,000. Pass the asparagus.
The main character, Lester Burnham, upends his life when he meets a young, beautiful woman that makes him want to live again.
Your father seems to think this kind of behavior is something to be proud of.
And your mother seems to prefer that I go through life like a prisoner while she keeps my in a mason jar under the sink.
In the movie City Slickers, Billy Crystal's character also arrives at middle age all of a sudden, as if looking up from the task of life for the very first time.
When you're a teenager, you think you can do anything, and you do. Your 20s are a blur. 30s, you raise your family, you make a little money, and you think to yourself, what happened to my 20s? 40s, you grow a little pot belly, you grow another chin. The music starts to get too loud. One of your old girlfriends from high school becomes a grandmother.
A lot of times the midlife crisis seems to be about dreading being old as much as it is about feeling dissatisfied right now. We assume it just gets worse.
You start eating dinner at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You have lunch around 10, breakfast the night before. Spend most of your time wandering around malls looking for the ultimate soft yogurt and muttering, how come the kids don't call? How come the kids don't call?
Turns out this movie trope speaks to a very real, scientifically observable trend.
We discovered these incredibly consistent patterns in the relationship between reported happiness on the one hand and age on the other.
This is Carol Graham with the Brookings Institution.
On average, most individuals experience a decline in their reported happiness starting sort of in the mid-20s, going down to a low point in about early or late 50s.
This is often the most stressful part of your life, the height of your career, the most responsibilities. It's all those things that the characters in American Beauty and City Slickers were going on about. But the surprising part, and what Hollywood doesn't always show, is that it gets better. Reported happiness bottoms out and then begins to curve back up.
So this distinct U-shaped curve crosses hundreds and thousands and indeed millions of people around the world.
The declining happiness part of the curve isn't hard to understand. When you're young,
it's easy to be much more hopeful about the future and to have high aspirations. But as you grow up, you realize, hey, a lot about being a grown-up is a lot of hard work.
What's a little harder to explain is that shift, why overall happiness swings back up after middle age. Graham says part of it is coming to terms with the things that used to disappoint you.
By the time people are in their mid-40s or late 40s, their aspirations adjust with their, more realistic expectations. And, bluntly put, if you're 45 and you can't sing and you don't play guitar, you probably figure out you're not going to be a rock star.
Another part comes from our psychology. Older people experience less emotional volatility. Graham says it's the wisdom of perspective.
Young people have more emotional swings in part because they have less experience with negative things or bad luck or whatever it might be. By the time you are in your late 40s, you've had so many bad experiences, they roll off your back, so to speak. But at least you realize that a bad experience isn't the end of the world.
And lastly, some of it could be attributed to our biology. There's research that shows
even chimpanzees have a sort of downward trend in their cheerfulness.
The shape of the U varies across countries. There are places that are just happier. In Latin American countries like Costa Rica and Scandinavian countries like Norway, the drop into midlife slump is shorter and shallower.
These places have a lot of things that make it better to get old. They have good safety nets. They have good family ties, good public health and education systems, good social security systems.
In other words, there's less to dread. All of this supports the idea of a midlife slump, but there's no research to back up the idea of a crisis, an acute culmination. But who knows, maybe Hollywood is onto something. Keep an eye on the middle-aged people in your life. For Philosophy Talk, I'm Liza Veal.
Thanks for that cinematic and scientific look at the midlife crisis, Liza. I'm Ken Taylor. With me is my Stanford colleague, Joshua Landy, and today we're thinking about midlife and meaning.
We're joined now by Kieran Setiya, professor of philosophy at MIT and author of Midlife, a Philosophical Guide. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, Kieran.
Thanks for having me.
So, Kieran, I know you reasonably well. I've seen you. You don't seem to me like a guy in the throes of a midlife crisis. You seem pretty chipper and cool to me. So, how'd you get interested in this subject? Surely not from personal experience.
Well, I think I hide it well. That's good. That's good. That's good to know. I think my experience was a little bit like the one Josh was describing earlier, of having really been incredibly lucky and successful, and realizing as I got tenure and I wrote a book and I got a job, I was going to keep doing this, and I was just going to keep doing it. And it seemed like my career, which had been a very big and important driving part of my life, still seemed worthwhile. But I definitely was struck and stopped short by that thought, well, is that it? Is this what it's going to be for the rest of my life? And that happened maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And naturally, I thought, well, maybe there's some philosophy in this. And that's how I started trying to work on the philosophy of midlife.
5 or 6 years ago, that's when you turned down Stanford and went to MIT.
It's funny. I'm sure that's entirely coincidental. Yeah.
So does that help us get a read on what the midlife crisis is? Because Ken and I were arguing earlier about the difference between midlife crisis and existential crisis. Does that shed any light on that? What is the midlife crisis in particular?
Well, I think it's has something to do with the sort of temporal structure of life and sort of the irreversibility of time. And I think there are really many things going on. In fact, I think there isn't just one midlife crisis, but a big part of it for me has to do with the cumulative achievement of goals, or failure in goals, and the sense that they get exhausted either by failure or by success, and then have to be replaced. And then you have to do something else, and you have to do something else. And the structure of life comes to feel like a kind of relentless grind of project after project. And I think, what Josh was describing earlier was a bit more extreme than my experience. He was describing a kind of a sense that nothing matters. In fact, what I found emotionally and intellectually puzzling and ultimately intriguing was the sense that actually things did seem to matter. I thought philosophy is interesting, teaching this class is worth doing, and yet there seemed to be an emptiness at the heart of it, a kind of something was missing, and that seemed to me odd. How could it be that I was doing something that seemed worthwhile and yet at the same time think, this is hollow, there's nothing there?
But let me ask you, going back to the roving report, and Liza said, well, maybe there's a midlife slump, but there's this U-shaped curve. That sounds like people just work out of this, and so it's not a crisis, it's just a little downturn. What makes it a crisis? That's a big word, unless we want to cheapen that word.
Well, one thing to say is I think the word has been cheapened, and I think that now when people talk about the midlife crisis, often now that the idea of the U-curve has been popularized, they really just mean the sort of dip in happiness around midlife. So when these studies were done on great apes, in which it turned out that they also have a U-curve in happiness by age, or seem to, the headlines were, chimpanzees have midlife crises too. So I think some of it is that the term has changed in meaning. The other thing to say is that if there's a sort of dip in average happiness, and people vary around the norm, around the average, you're also going to see the highest incidence of extremes at that point. So, there is some evidence that the highest incidence of depression is in midlife, sort of mid-late 40s.
And is that a universal thing? I've been thinking about Clarissa Dalloway. Did she have a midlife crisis? In other words, does this cut across genders? Is this just a first world problem, or is it a universal thing?
Well, the U-curve evidence shows up for men and women equally.
Right.
And it shows up around the world. It does show, as the roving reporter said, it shows up differently in different countries, slightly less in the developing than the developed world. But it does show up. So it seems like it's something fairly pervasive. One thing that's very hard to know is, was it true 200 years ago? We don't have the kind of evidence
but Kieran,
that enables us to
I want to
answer
just put a small point before we take a break. You don't want to use the term midlife crisis just to name the trough of that U-shaped curve, do you? You mean something more really crisis-like, I assume. Isn't that right or not?
I would be happy to use it in the broader way. I mean, I think that in a way, even if it's not a crisis, the process of sort of coming to terms with success and failure, the regret about the past, the missing out on things, and the inexorable passage of time, I think that phenomenon is worth addressing seriously and philosophically, whether or not it reaches the extreme of a crisis.
Okay, that's a good point, and we'll come back to that after a short break. You're listening to Philosophy Talk. Today, we're thinking about midlife and meaning with Kieran Setiya from MIT.
How can philosophy help us diagnose the midlife crisis? Can it help us overcome it? Is there a philosophical way to live one's middle years?
Midlife, meaning, and mortality. Plus, your calls and emails when Philosophy Talk continues.
That's all there is.
Maybe that's all there is to midlife, but not to this show. I'm Ken Taylor. This is Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything.
Except your intelligence. I'm Josh Landy, and we're thinking about midlife and meaning. Our guest is Kieran Setiya from MIT, who's the author of Midlife, a Philosophical Guide.
Okay, Kieran, so I think we've got a decent idea. I think we can deepen it as we go along, but for now, we've got a decent idea of what the midlife crisis is. But, this is something that psychotherapists think about. What can philosophy do to help us? Can philosophy help us understand the causes and sources? Can it provide some solutions? Let's start with the causes, and then we'll think about the solutions. Can philosophy help us understand the causes of a midlife crisis?
Well, I think that insofar as the causes involve attitudes to time or ways of thinking about the temporal structure of life or the values of different activities or the range of possibilities that confront us, I think the intellectual study of those ideas can be helpful. And so I think, in a way, what philosophy can potentially provide is a kind of very abstract cognitive therapy where we can find out whether some of the malaise that surrounds midlife turns on misconceptions about time or possibility.
So to help, let's go through this a little more slowly then. So you're confident that it both can help us understand why of a midlife crisis and the how to get through it, how to navigate it well by clearing up understanding. But let's start with the help us understand from a philosophical perspective why it shouldn't be surprising to us, given the temporal arc of a human life, that people sometimes experience midlife crises.
Well, as I said before, I think there's sort of several aspects to that. So I'm going to pick one to start with.
Right.
One
That's good.
is the structure of projects. So this is something that you were both talking about in the initial conversation you were having, and I think there's a way in which there's a kind of puzzle about the pursuit of desires, the pursuit of projects that the 19th century philosopher Schopenhauer was very obsessed by, which was the thought that when you want something, not having it is kind of painful. But then, of course, as soon as you get it, you're done and it's over with, and now you need to move on. And he thought this was just a deep problem with desire as such. There was no way out of this. And I think that's not quite right. But there is a genuine puzzle there, in that if your life is structured around goals, the thing you want is sort of always at a distance in the future. And then as soon as you've got it, it's sort of archived into the past. It's over with. And your engagement with it takes the form of trying to complete it. So you're as if you're constantly trying to take the things that are meaningful in your life, and by completing them, kick them out of your life. And I do think that's something that can especially come into focus around midlife as you start to either achieve or don't achieve major life ambitions, like you have a family or you don't have a family, or you have a kind of career that you worked many years to get or you don't. And so the project-like orientation of your life and the sources of meaning in it can really come into focus. And I do think that that's a kind of problem that philosophical ideas can diagnose.
I think that's I agree totally. I'm a huge fan of Schopenhauer. So, but it sounds like you're saying, look, we made it. We tend to make a certain kind of mistake. We put these projects into the future, and then we've achieved them when they're in the past, and we're never in the moment. So it sounds like you're about to tell us, live in the moment, man.
Well, that's the solution,
Right.
Right. But I want to go back to whether that's the right diagnosis. I think there's, Kieran, I think there's something deep to that. I'm not quite sure it's the whole story because, well, maybe what I think is consistent with what you think. I'm going to try out a thought in you. Right?
Sure.
I think of life as not so much projects, but experiments. Right. What do I want to be? Well, there's no fixed given answer. I want to be a philosopher. I want to be a painter. I want to be I'm going to try out the philosopher thing. And either it gives me satisfaction or it doesn't. I expect it to give me a certain satisfaction. At midlife, a lot of these experiments have been tried, and the verdict is in. Oh my God, I don't love philosophy nearly as much as I did, or I love it, but I don't love it. It doesn't give me the satisfaction I expected. So some of my experiments work out, some of them don't work out, and midlife is an accumulation. I mean, I don't know if that's tied to that desire. That's just like life is an experiment, and experiments sometimes crash and sometimes succeed. Is that inconsistent, different, related to your thought or not?
I think it's different, and I think there is a kind of tension there. In that part of what I'm thinking is that sometimes what's happening is that you've tried something and it just wasn't the right fit for you, and the lack of satisfaction reflects the need for a change in life. But part of what was puzzling me, at least in my own experience, was the thought, it's not that there's something else I want to be doing rather than philosophy. The problem is that I'm doing exactly what I want and still not finding the satisfaction in it. So I think there's two different cases. There is the case where at midlife you realize you need a change. And then there's the puzzle that even when there's no alternative that would be better, having a kind of project-like, goal-oriented relationship with something you care about and something you're invested in can mean that even if you've made the right choices, there's something hollow and frustrating.
I got you. So, I mean, there are that means there are multiple possible sources. But what you said makes me think of what psychologists call affective forecasting. And it turns out there's all these experiments. You want X and you think getting X will make you this happy. And you ask in advance, how happy will getting X make you? And people say N. Right. And then they get X. And instead of being N happy, they're like N minus M for some M. Right. So we are really bad at forecasting how happy achieving our goals will make us. And once I achieve the goal, if I compare it to my expectation, right, I'm often like really disappointed. I thought I was going to be this happy, but I'm so less happy. I don't know how that, because I don't know how that relates
first of all,
to your
you're blinding
thought.
me with science here, Ken. Secondly, that doesn't sound like what Kieran's talking about.
No, I know. That's why I want to know how.
I take it to be a deeper worry. Maybe Kieran, you can say who's right here, but it sounds like you're saying somebody can be doing the thing they love the most and care about the most, and yet there's some kind of way in which even that thing which they think is important and valuable and maybe even doing something for other people, for the world, it's just not worthwhile. Why can some people, I mean, that sounds like a crisis, right?
Well,
it doesn't
that's
just
true.
sound like a dip. That's a real crisis.
I know. I mean, but I think, Josh, you're breaking a good point. But I want to know how that relates to the effective forecasting, which is a robust phenomenon. So are these two different things, related things, or what?
I think it's hard to say. I mean, so the affective forecasting thing is sort of precedes the science, and that there's in Anna Karenina, Count Vronsky seduces Anna Karenina and then says he realizes the eternal error men make in thinking that happiness lies in the satisfaction of their desires.
Yeah.
So I think that phenomenon of you get what you wanted and it isn't all it's cracked up to be is recognized by writers as well as scientists. I think the interpretation of that is up for grabs. Like whether what's going on is just we're bad at predicting what will make us happy, and if we'd picked other things, we might have, or if we'd relied not on our own judgments but on objective evidence, we might have ended up happier. That's one diagnosis of what's going on. Another is just no. The problem is it's sort of endemic to the project-like nature of our motivation that we're going to end up disappointed, because insofar as what we're aiming for is an achievable finite goal, then as soon as it's done, it inevitably is over with. And so there's going to be a kind of disappointment because that just lies in the temporal structure of the pursuit of projects. So I think which of those interpretations to give to the hedonic treadmill, the affective forecasting problem, is unclear. So it's a bit it's hard to know, I think, whether that exactly fits the phenomenon I'm describing or is an alternative to it.
Okay, that's interesting stuff. I mean, it's complicated. You're telling us this is really complicated turf, both for philosophy and science. I'd love to get some callers in here. And Ariane from San Francisco's on the line. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, Ariane.
Thank you for taking my call. I just want to reiterate about the externalization of happiness and how we live in the richest and most materialistic country in the world, and 1 out of 10 adults are prescribed antidepressants, and how we need to see that our relentless and unending desires are conditioned by our economic ethos and our Calvinist origins that said that those who had the most materialistic objects and status and power were superior in the eyes of God. And what you're describing is this sort of psychological reckoning on an individual level related to middle age, but also something that's going on in our country at this time, where we're starting to question the unsustainability of our desires and how they promote anger and violence and war as we want other people's things. And that contrasts with relationships, which are messy, and profound experiences, which are invisible and unmeasurable, and counter the world of science.
So, Ariane, I'm going to let Kieran respond to that. Thanks so much for the call. You got a response to that, Kieran?
That fits exactly how I'm thinking about it. I think the acquisitive desires and the projects of achieving certain kinds of status in society, that's a particularly toxic form of the sort of goal-oriented motivation, because it's not just goal-oriented, it's also oriented towards goals that are often not coming from you or not fully autonomous or authentic. And so I think that's especially problematic. And I think relationships are an important contrast because, again, they're not the only kind of activity in life where we value the process of engagement more than the product. But there are very clear instances of that. I think no one is hanging out with their friends primarily in order to achieve things with them, or if they were, they would be sort of instrumentalizing their friends in a way that's inconsistent with true friendships. I think relationships are a case where it's easy for us still to see a kind of value in the process that I think there is in other activities in life, but it takes effort to unearth that.
Okay, well, so here we have a contrast of two kinds of goal, right? So one is, or rather, a kind of goal-oriented life where you're trying to acquire things, and on the other side, hanging out with friends that doesn't really have a goal. That sounds very attractive. What about a third option, which is being, for example, a climate scientist, right? What if you spend your life actually trying to solve the problems of the world? Wouldn't that maybe, insulate you against a midlife crisis?
Well, I think the problem with goal-oriented activities isn't specific to selfish goals as opposed to altruistic or outward-looking goals. I think there's still going to be the problem of aiming at a future target that achieving which would sort of leave you with a sense of emptiness. And in the case of the climate scientist, I think the problem is not so much that you're going to achieve it too quickly. I think the problem is that the goal looks too precarious and too distant. And even there, I think, seeing value in the process of pursuing it independent of the goals or in addition to the achievement of the goals is important, I think. And it's important partly because when you're pursuing something that is as difficult and distant as the goal of, for instance, forestalling the worst effects of global warming, seeing that there's value in trying to do that, even no matter what the results are, is a way of insulating yourself against hopelessness. So I think even altruistic activities, this transition or shift is important.
So, Kieran, we've shifted to talking about how philosophy can help us get through midlife. It sounds like, right? We're not trying to diagnose the sources of it anymore. So it sounds like you've got, like, I can't remember, is it 11 ideas, 6 ideas? You got various number of ideas.
Very good ideas.
Yeah, we can't go through them all. So I want you to give me because there are different aspects of midlife, you say in your book, but give me your single biggest bang for the buck. If there were one takeaway that you were going to leave those suffering a midlife crisis. I know that's a hard thing to do, and they could read your book and get them all, but...
No, for me, it really is the fact that when we're engaging in activities, usually what we're doing is simultaneously pursuing some goal. And, I'm trying to get a promotion at work, but I'm also just doing my job, or I'm trying to help my kids with their homework. And I'm also just engaged in interacting with my kids or parenting. And that there's a dangerous tendency to place too much value in the goal-oriented side of what we're doing and not enough value in the process. And I think that is a source of sort of emptiness and a sense of hollowness, because what we're doing is failing to see or fully appreciate the value of the ongoing activity that's fully realized in the present.
So,
And
but I want to ask you something, though. Okay, Kieran, I want to ask you, Sisyphus. Imagine Sisyphus happy. He's fully engaged, if Camus could be believed. He can live well if he's fully engaged in this utterly meaningless thing. Josh said, "Oh no, but without
a goal,
thieves,
there is no
there is no."
process.
Whose side are you on, Sisyphus or Josh's?
Well, I agree that Sisyphus, that the rolling the rock up the hill over and over again is not the ideal life. Absolutely. So, unlike some sort of advocates of the live in the present ideas, one of the things I did in working on this topic was read a lot of self-help books where this idea gets thrown out. And often what they say is obscure, and also they often suggest that it's some kind of miracle cure, that somehow if you're living in the present, you're immune from all harm, everything is bound to be perfect. And that's not what I think. My thought is, if you're engaging in a valuable activity, then the right way to orient yourself is to appreciate the value in the ongoing process. That doesn't help if the thing you're engaged in isn't really worth doing to begin with. So what I'm thinking is, what's the right way to engage in activities that are actually valuable?
Right.
Not that as soon as you engage with things in this way, it's bound to be wonderful for you.
I got you. And Christina in Berkeley's on the line. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, Christina.
Hi, I have two things. First,
give us one. Give us one first.
They go together. A favorite quote of mine from Jung is, "All true things must change, and only that which changes remains true." And I think a lot of it has to do with getting stuck and trying to hold on to things that have passed their prime, and then wondering what you think the elongated term of adolescence has to do with all of this. I'll take my answer off the air. Thanks.
Thanks for Christina. So what do you think? Our elongated adolescence? I know that demographers are inventing a new term, adolescence, because it takes us forever to grow up. So what do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely, been a shift in when people think of middle age, for instance. So when the term midlife crisis was coined by this Canadian psychoanalyst Elliot Jacques in 1965, the people he thought were having midlife crises were 35. And for me, that seemed about right. That was 35. I immediately thought time for a midlife crisis. But I think nowadays a lot of people think of middle age as really you only really hit it when you're 40s or 50s. So I think there's a kind of changing in the shape of the life cycle in which these kind of crises get put off because people are striving early to maintain the sense that they're still young and youthful and not yet middle-aged for longer. So I think there is a change, genuine change there, at least for instance, in the U.S. I mean, the other thing the caller said was that there's a sort of constant need for change in life. And, I think that is probably true. It's something to which I think I'm temperamentally less attuned, in that for what was puzzling to me was precisely the sense that I didn't want to do anything dramatically different. I just wanted to do philosophy and enjoy it the way I did when I was first discovering philosophy. And I think part of that was for me that when I first discovered philosophy, my orientation to it was much more just joy in the activity, in the sheer fact that one could think about these questions.
You're listening to Philosophy Talk. We're thinking about midlife and meaning with Kieran Setiya from MIT, author of Midlife, a Philosophical Guide.
Can philosophy help us avoid the midlife crisis altogether? What can younger folks learn now that's going to save them from having to buy sports cars in their 50s?
Crisis avoidance strategies, when Philosophy Talk continues.
Footsteps I hear when they get on the decks. Okay, stop.
I know one person who's getting through midlife without losing his edge. It's the guy sitting next to me, Ken Taylor. I'm Josh Landy, and this is Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything
except your intelligence. Our guest is Kieran Setiya from MIT, author of Midlife, a Philosophical Guide. When you get to be my age, Josh, midlife is starting to be in the rearview mirror. But we've got a caller, Elia from Oakland's on the line. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, Elia. What's your comment or question?
Thank you. I was wondering if this crisis is an outcome of our failure to take care of our souls. If that is the case, can spirituality help us manage the crisis?
Take care of our souls. Is that what you ask?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks for the question, Kieran. What do you think? Taking care of the soul.
Well, I think that it's a notable feature of the way I've approached the topic that it is secular. I'm not thinking of religion as a source of solace. It's not something that's part of my life. But when I try to integrate that, thinking about religion as a sort of outsider, it does strike me that certain kinds of activities that are very important to people who are religious have this non-goal-oriented structure. They involve kind of a relationship with God or a relationship with a community where the value is found in a way that's sort of ongoing and eternally present. And so I think it would make sense if religion provided a kind of bulwark against an excessively project-oriented, goal-driven attitude to life.
Okay, but let's. Your book is so wonderful, and I love the goal-oriented, the discussion about goals versus process. But I also really like this other part where you talk about essentially reevaluation of your life. I mean, so you mentioned one of my favorite TV shows from my childhood, the Fall and Rise of Reginald Perrin, which I don't know if many non-British listeners are going to know about, but suffice to say,
I'm outnumbered here.
Yeah, exactly, 2 against 1. But a wonderful scenario in which this middle-aged guy essentially, gets his same life back, but under a new description. All of a sudden, it's something he's chosen. It's something it's a kind of almost like a remarriage story. So, can you tell us something about that? Like, other than focusing on the process rather than the goal, what about this part about thinking about your life that you currently have in a new light?
Yes, I think that the Reggie Perrin story was very inspiring to me, which is the guy who has a kind of boring commute and he's stuck in his marriage and he fakes his own death, runs and then comes back under an assumed name and gets rehired to his old job and seduces his past wife and sort of begins his old life again. And part of what I think that scenario enables us to sort of think through is the way in which we value options, the sense of having diminished possibilities, that when we were younger, we might have had all these options ahead of us. And now in middle age, the sense is that whatever you want to do, there's certain things you have to do that constrain what lives are available to you. And I think the Reggie Perrin story is interesting because what it suggests is that even if you've got the right options, the fact that they're no longer chosen by you can be a diminishment. And so part of his genius is to say, what I need is this. I love my wife. I just would like to feel like I don't have to continue with her, but I want to continue with her.
But I think Reggie, what's his name, Reggie Perrin?
Yes.
Needs to read a little Sartre or de Beauvoir or something, because actually at every moment, here's the thing, I don't know if I have a deep disagreement with you or not. You have this difference between a process-oriented life and a goal-oriented. You've used this fancy, lovely vocabulary of telic, like telos directed toward an end and atelic not directed toward an end, right? But in a way, life is essentially atelic. It's essentially process oriented because every moment is a moment of choice and commitment. At every moment, it's open to you to choose or re-choose. And your life always says to you, do you choose me again? Do you choose me again? And I can always say, yes, I choose you, or I unchoose you. It's true. It's a crisis when the choices that you made add up to a lot of brute facticity, such that to make a new choice is fraught with risk and peril. That's a real crisis and not just a U-shaped curve. So I don't know. I think there's an essential atelicity in life because a life is choosing and committing, always, at every moment.
I mean, I see that as a sense in which, sort of in principle, I could leave whatever I'm doing. I could quit my job. And so there's a way in which my continuing with it is a kind of choice. But there is also the mundane sense that it would be extremely difficult. And
yes,
some of the things
makes it a crisis.
Yeah.
Because the costs are elevated when you've invested all this. That makes it a crisis because they're elevated costs. And it says to you, how much courage do you have? How much courage life is saying to you at this moment? How much courage and self-ownership do you have?
So I think sometimes the right response to the sense of constraint is to say, I need to make a change. Do I have the courage to do it? What I'm interested in is the ways in which, even when that isn't true, it can seem true. It can seem like there's an allure that comes from sort of the frustration of not having options. And that can be because really you do need to make a change. But having other options can seem appealing, not because you need to make a change, but because it alters the meaning of what you're actually doing. So in a way, the point of analyzing philosophically the sort of value of options is to enable people to think through whether the sense of constraint is a sign that they need to make a major change, or whether it's just a sign of the fact that the practical constraint means that it's not going to seem the same. It's not going to feel as free as it did earlier. But that's not because there's something better.
Yeah, we got a caller, JJ, suddenly at a winery in Sonoma. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, JJ. Hope you're sipping some fine wine.
Whole lot, dude. No, you're right. We got fine vino. This discussion prompts a memory of sailing back from the Bahamas in the Gulf Stream and spinning that marine radio dial and picking up Paul Harvey, page 2. So I'm spinning the dial in my car at this winery, and I pick up a distinguished dude from MIT talking about the midlife crisis of the great ape. I'm in. So you guys are fascinating, and I just say this. Somebody just asked me, how did you live in Florida with the humidity? I said I simply unplugged the negative input cord to my brain. So therefore I have no data. So therefore I can't make a judgment. And therefore it's excellent. I'm digging it. And so it's all perspective. It's all vibration. Focus on the positive. Lose the negatives.
Thanks, JJ. What do you think of that,
Kieran?
Kieran?
It does sound similar to Kieran's point about reevaluation.
Yeah, it
right?
does.
You've got all these choices, but it's a question of how you think about them. That's how you pull yourself out of this.
Yeah, but it's phrased by a guy drinking some very fine wine.
And who's been sailing in the Bahamas.
Yeah. What do you think of that,
exactly.
Kieran?
Yeah, I want what he's having. That seems like the way to go. He seemed to have it figured out. I do think there's a kind of broader sense in which part of what happens to people in midlife often is a kind of re-narrating of the past, and the sense that although you can't change the past, the meaning of past events can be changed or at least reevaluated by understanding the way in which things that matter in your present life, things you're attached to in your present life, depend upon things that in your past, maybe even things in your past that are regrettable or that you at the time you wish hadn't happened. I think that's a process that can be analyzed philosophically, and that is something people go through in coming to terms with the fact that they're living, the one life they're going to get to live, and that it has the particular shape it does when they're 40, 50.
Absolutely. So I totally agree with you, but let me make a point inspired by our friend Lanier Anderson. It's danger. There's a danger there that you're just going to deceive yourself if all you're doing is telling your life back to yourself in a kind of more rosy way. And he would say it's not just a matter of telling yourself a story. You've got to do something in order to legitimate that story. If you have a regret about something in your past life, you've got to make a change, and you've got to redeem it in some kind of concrete, practical way.
I mean, I think that's sometimes true. It's sometimes there's a sort of there is a change that needs to be made to sort of complete the story or complete the narrative. But there are also cases which are more straightforward. So one of the cases that I'm very gripped by is comes from a thought experiment by the philosopher Derek Parfit, who died earlier this year, in which he imagined someone with a temporary condition in which if they conceive a child now, it will have migraines or something. And they think, I should wait. But they don't, and they have the child. And in that kind of case, just the sheer existence of the child and your attachment to the child enables you to look back and think, well, yeah, I can't really regret my decision.
Right.
And there's no further thing you need to do. It's just a matter of properly appreciating and being attached to the particulars of your actual life. And so I'm interested in the question how far that kind of phenomenon generalizes.
This is the really big topic, and we could talk about it at length. But before we leave, we're getting down to, I want you to talk to the younger people. Give me a minute worth of advice of how I might avoid, if I'm 22 or 19 or a young college student at Stanford or MIT, living a life that's going to culminate, or maybe temporarily culminate, in a midlife crisis.
This is something I think about a lot because one of the things that's very striking about the MIT undergrads is that they're extremely driven and they're extremely project-oriented.
So
and they have a lot they want to achieve. And I worry about them, that they're setting themselves up for a realization that succeed or fail, that their relationship, for instance, to the scientific endeavors that they're invested in isn't fully engaged with just the sheer joy and of the process of doing it.
Okay, I get the problem. I know it. I live it too. I see it in my students. Preach to them now.
Preach to what to do. Well, so this is where things get kind of practical in a way that is awkward for the analytic philosopher. But the thing that helps me really is meditation. So there's the kind of meditation in which one slows down one's thinking and stops it from projecting forwards, kind of mindfulness meditation. I think one role that can play in life is to enable you to detach a little from future goals and to appreciate not just simple atelic processes like breathing, listening to sounds, but to bring that into other aspects of your life and appreciate the process of what you're doing more. And so that's something I find helpful and that I definitely would recommend other people try.
Yeah. I think there must be more to it, though. I'd love to talk to you about this, but unfortunately, Kieran, we're out of time. This has been a great conversation, and I want to thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Our guest has been Kieran Setiya, a professor of philosophy, who could have been at Stanford, but went off to MIT instead. He's author of Midlife, a philosophical guide. So, Josh, you got any? Are you over your midlife crisis?
I feel a little better. Maybe it's just shared suffering. I don't know. No, look, I find this idea of having goals, trying to pick the right goals, but also finding some way to appreciate the process as well. I find that actually very inspiring, whether you could go through meditation or something else. What do you think?
No, I think that's right, but I think life is that thing. I think life is an atelic thing because life is the process of choosing a life, right? I don't think you could, there's the Buddhist thing, you can just kind of go with the buzz, but I don't think I think life is always saying, what do you choose now? So enjoy the thing of choosing, and don't be wedded so much to the choice, but the choosing.
Right, because it's about, the guy in Sonoma is right. It is about your perspective. So maybe life is that, but you have to think about it in the right kind of way.
No, that's true. That's definitely true. You have to think of it in the right way. And philosophy can help you think about it in the right way. I think all three of us agree about that, and we're right.
Hear, hear.
Okay. But this wonderful conversation, continues at Philosopher's Corner at our online community of thinkers, where our motto is, now get this, cogito ergo blog. I think, therefore I blog. That's very atelic. And you can also become a partner in that community by registering at our website, philosophytalk.org.
And if you have a question that wasn't addressed in today's show, we'd love to hear it. Send it to us at comments@philosophytalk.org, and we might feature it on our blog. Now let's hear from a guy who speeds through all his crises. It's Ian Scholes, the 60-second philosopher.
Ian Scholes. Speaking personally, my life has been one long midlife crisis since about, age 17. Am I doing the right thing? What's life all about? Should I go over there or stay right here? Such introspective deep dives are always undercut by other concerns. Can I pay the rent? Does she like me? Should I maybe keep my mouth shut for once in my stupid life? So I'm an anomaly. Non-stop crisis management, dwindling resources. Well, okay, maybe I'm not so alone. Midlife crises are mainly a guy thing. Women, in my experience, are always questioning what they're doing. What has value? How to balance what must be done with what could be done. And then getting together with other women to drink wine, work through issues, pick at lunch, and at a toxic past. Midlife crises with women manifest as coloring the hair a kind of cinnamon color and buying a red Chrysler Sebring convertible. With men, it also often involves a sports car purchase, accompanied by very poor life decisions, taking up with a gal half their age, quitting their job, learning how to make cheese, starting a rock and roll band, risking their life savings on a roll of the dice, juggling, wool gathering, skydiving, wandering aimlessly, striding purposely off a cliff, writing a terrible novel, buying a semi-automatic weapon and an hour's worth of ammo. Let's not go there. Along with coming-of-age stories, midlife crises have provided a rich subject for movies, probably because movie stars get older, audiences get older, and there's a shared metaphorical experience. Here's a partial list of movies spurred by midlife angst: Bridges of Madison County, Bulworth, Fatal Attraction, Falling Down, Bad Lieutenant, The Shining, 8.5, Network, The Wild Bunch. There's a midlife crisis movie trope for you, the one last job motif. One more robbery and then I'm done. One more train and that's it. I'll do this bank and then we'll finally get married, honey. Of course, by and large, it doesn't work out. It ends badly. And there's our Puritan strain smashing smack dab into our libertarian strain. We could do anything if it weren't for Jesus and bureaucracies. Curse this darn morality and curse this paperwork. But we are our own worst enemy. When we have youthful dreams of wealth, it usually involves an environment of shiny furniture, sexy companions, a hi-fi system, a home theater, a private golf course, a swimming pool as big as a city block, cocktails, and a house that is also a gleaming tower that scares poor people away. We don't escape to that tower, though. We either inherit it or we earn it by making a cheap car, finding oil, making a phone you can fit in your pocket, or foreclosing on all Americans in the order of their poverty. If you're rich like that, a midlife crisis is wasted. That was the point of Citizen Kane, wasn't it? though you will remember he died with all his toys, even his sled. As we get older, though, and even more not wealthy, the penthouse and pied-à-terre in the south of France are just pictures in a magazine. Even in the movies, the one last job before early retirement usually only holds out the promise of Mexico, which is where every thief longs to escape. Once you get over the border, the feds can't grab you. No more shining castle on the hill, but you can live cheaply in a shack by the ocean, counting your money in a counting sack, sipping margaritas with a comely senorita or senor. Shawshank Redemption, the getaway. Make that run for the border. It's a devalued paradise, downsized for the gig economy. And like anything else, our dreams of Mexico are mixed in with history. The chaos of the Mexican Revolution mixed in with windsurfing, Aztec ruins, mixed in with drug cartels, mixed in with golf, mixed in with snorkeling assassins, mixed in with disco dancing, and it all makes for a heady daydream for your average middle-aged cube monkey. Disappear like Ambrose Bierce. End up on the beach with Salma Hayek doing tequila shots, or get shot up in the square by General Mapache's army. Either way, well, it beats working. I gotta go.
Philosophy Talk is a presentation of KALW, local public radio San Francisco, and the trustees of Leland Stanford Junior University, copyright 2017.
Our executive producers are David Demarest and Matt Martin.
Our senior producer is Devin Strolovich. Laura McGuire is our director of research. Cindy Prince-Baum is our director of marketing.
Thanks also to Merle Kessler, Angela Johnston, and Colin Peden.
Support for Philosophy Talk comes from various groups at Stanford University and from the partners at our online community of thinkers.
The views expressed or misexpressed in this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of Stanford University or of our other funders, not even when they're true and reasonable.
The conversation continues on our website, philosophytalk.org, where you, too, can become a partner in our community of thinkers. I'm John Perry.
And I'm Ken Taylor. Thank you for listening.
And thank you for thinking.
We were talking about our lives, and we both kind of realized we're kids. We're not men.
So then you asked yourselves, isn't there something more to life?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, well, let me clue you in on something. There isn't.